Hi, my name is Lisa White, and I'm president of Radman White and Associates. Our firm has been transitioning endodontic practices for 23 years. Now, I realize that most of you are general dentists, so all the numbers contained herein will be applicable to general dentistry. Today's topic is don't let fear drive you. You could earn an extra 4.2 million. We're going to walk through and see how this 4.2 million number is actually quite conservative. The 4.2 million is a minimum additional amount that you should expect to earn as an owner. But let's start with fear. This is regarding the Y2K or the millennial bug. There was just a significant fear that the rollover from 1999 to 2000 was going to be catastrophic. Everyone was living in fear of what the year would bring, like fear of flying, fear of terrorism, even fear of the apocalypse. I mean, here we are 20 years later, and fear is still a central theme. I think the reasons dentists want to start as an associate is the main reason. Number one is fear. We've kind of talked about that, but it can be overwhelming and people are fearful to jump in. I think another good reason is that you have an opportunity to build your skills and speed. Now, if you need to build skills, I think starting as an employee is a great way to do so. But some of you are ready to go, especially the endodontists. The easiest path to take. I'm certain that dentistry wasn't the easiest path, but I understand that at this point, an easy path for a little while might make sense if that's the best fit for you. I think the risk is less perceived risk. I think risk is relative. No additional debt, that's certainly true. Perhaps you can't find the perfect practice. That's a lofty goal. Not sure you'll ever find the perfect practice, but you should be able to find one that checks most of the boxes and that cash flows really nicely. Less commitment. My hope is that your commitment is to your patients and the chair, and that whether you're an owner or an associate, you're committed to providing the best treatment you can treat. If you treat your patients in the chair as you would treat your mom if she was in the chair, I can guarantee you're going to be successful, because people will understand that you care about them and that you're committed, and it doesn't matter what role you're in, you'll be successful. Now, as an associate, clearly you don't have management responsibilities, and it can be a great or a good place to start. But what drives you? How do you feel about these? Your lifestyle, retirement age, managing a practice, control, and debt. Regarding your lifestyle, are you okay if you earn less income on the work that you complete? Is it okay with you to have to do more work to make the same amount of money? I ask this because employee dentists typically work for 10% less of their production than an owner dentist. Now, in addition to working for 10% less, you also in this role can have the lower insurance plans that you're covering, or your reimbursements are lower. Additionally, as a corporate employee, you work on average 1/3 more hours per week than an average owner. So the question becomes, do you want to do 50% more work to earn the same amount? Now, if you're an endodontist in the group, this 10% up top, you would work for 20% less and possibly closer to 35% less as an employee as compared to an owner. Okay, what age do you want to be able to retire? The ADA health policy says that the average retirement age for a dentist is 68.9. That seems high, for I can't imagine that most dentists want to work 40, 42 years, depending, of course, on the age they are when they graduate dental school. But is your retirement age determined by you hit a certain age or when you have enough money? And what is enough money to retire? How many years do you want to work? And how long can your body handle dentistry? I think that's an important factor too. I hate bringing that up, but unfortunately, we've had several people have to come to us to sell their practices because they were no longer able, their shoulder, neck, arms gave out. Please have insurance for that. I hope you never need it, and I hope it never happens to you. But obviously, if you're able to retire 15 years earlier, your body has a better chance of being able to handle the stress. And due to the profit that practice owners make, you should be able to retire 10 to 15 years earlier. But what is profit? Profit is the income that an owner receives but doesn't have to work for. So profit is another way of saying unearned revenue. For example, let's talk about hygiene profit. In a GP office, obviously there's hygiene income. So the hygiene income is their revenue, less what you pay the hygienist for that. Everything left over is hygiene profit. The owner earns this hygiene profit. And in a practice, oftentimes hygiene profit will cover the payments for you to own a practice. So profit is strictly a benefit of ownership. It does not include your salary. And if you're not an owner, you will not receive profit. But how is profit calculated? Okay, so we would start with the actual practice gross income, meaning the collections to the practice, everything that comes in. Then we would figure out what the actual real expenses of the practice are. Now, when I say real expenses, I mean the overhead of the practice that relates to the practice. So we're going to take out owner benefits. If the owner is running through a Tesla car, that is not an actual practice expense, that is an owner benefit. Included here should be 35% of the owner's salary, because you would have to pay somebody a percentage to do that work. So we do include a 35% overhead for salary of the owner. Now, when we reach these real practice expenses and we deduct them from the total collections, what we have left is the gross income. That amount left over is profit. This is dollars that an owner receives that he doesn't have to work for. Practice owners receive profit on their own work and also that of hygienists. So how do we get profit? Well, you have to own something. You can own real estate, stocks in the market, gold, commodities, or businesses. Now, clearly, if you own your own dental practice, this is the best way to invest in yourself, and it's the most control you'll ever have over anything else. You don't have control of how the stock market does or what the silver market's doing, but you can definitely control your practice and you can invest in yourself. Now, because you have to own something to get profit, this is the reason that we see corporate or DSOs entering the dental real estate, the dental market. They want to purchase these practices because they understand the amount of profit that is in them, and they want that for themselves. They then hire employees who do not have wealth creation, and they make a lot of money. Maybe you don't want to own a practice because you're fearful of running it yourself. The good news is the seller should be an incredibly valuable resource. This seller should fully transition the practice to you. And in addition to helping with the clinical, they should be helping you with all phases of the transition, including showing you how the business is run. By the time they're done with the transition, you should be able to emulate how the sellers manage the practice. Now, if you prefer not to handle these aspects yourself, you can certainly hire many different consultants. You can hire a marketing consultant, insurance credentialing, a payroll company, and likelihood is you already have an office manager. But even if you hire out the many facets to your practice, you should still earn considerably more as an owner. Control. Do you want control over your days? How is your schedule set? Does it work for you and your family? Some people are working in a practice where they don't get any control over how many patients they see a day. They don't understand why they're allocated more patients than they feel like they can see, how long is allocated to each patient. Do you want to schedule treatments when you want them? As a practice owner, you have complete autonomy with not only all of these items, but you have autonomy with what treatments are done and what is pushed upon the patient. Now, it is my hope that you are never in a practice where you're asked to sold a treatment or ask someone to take upon treatments that are not necessary. Sadly, I have heard of that. I hope that never happens to any of you. But in your own practice, you can decide how are we going to handle these things? How are we going to explain what treatment is needed? And are we going to treat the patient the right way? So additionally, as an owner, you get to control what insurance plans to accept. Perhaps there are insurance patients that have reimbursements that are below what should be expected. I actually talked with an endodontist recently, and he performed a molar retreatment for $450. Most practice owners would not accept that. If that was a fee in your practice, I would assume you would either A, renegotiate that plan, or B, drop it. I've never heard of a molar reimbursement. I'd never heard of one under $950 till that conversation. So sometimes the plans just don't make sense. And if you're working for somebody else, you could be stuck on a plan like that all day. Now, what about supplies, equipment, technology? Do you want control over that? Do you want to have a choice in what your assistants and staff is? And what type of practice atmosphere do you want to work in? You can create a culture depending on how you set up your practice. Debt. No one wants debt, right? But what if your debt allows your income to increase in excess of the debt you're taking on? This would be similar to the debt you likely went into when you became a dentist. I'm assuming your thought process was that the debt to become a dentist is acceptable because you felt confident that once you got your dental degree, your salary was going to increase in such a way that it would cover that debt, and this was a good choice for you. Well, the debt to purchase a practice is similar debt. This should be debt that more than covers. The profit in the practice should more than cover the debt you're taking on, meaning the profit exceeds the debt. So if the profit from the practice pays off the debt to buy the practice, and you are left with more income as a result of having this debt, I would look at this as similar to debt that you took on to becoming a dentist. And hygiene income can actually purchase a practice for you. If the practice is being run correctly and it's priced correctly, this hygiene income is so profitable that the payments can be covered simply from the hygiene that is left over. We talked about the difference. Now, additionally, the seller might work back. And if the seller works back, he also will reduce the debt on the practice and can actually pay down part of the practice for you. I would refer to debt to purchase a practice as investment debt. Now, return on investment debt is debt that creates freedom and profit. This is a kind of debt that allows you to make money that exceeds the debt. Let's talk about the taxes related to this. Because of the way the government is set up, you are allowed to deduct 100% of the purchase price of a practice. When you're allowed to take these deductions, it does reduce your tax liability by 30 to 40%. Now, obviously, an employee doesn't have this tax deduction, and you're going to pay taxes either way. But as an owner, you can write off the tax deductions over time. There are additional tax advantages to ownership, such as perhaps you choose to take your CE in the middle of ski season in Vail. That trip now becomes deductible, and you can spend your time doing so. Perhaps you run your car through your practice. Again, there are many different tax benefits to being an owner. As far as this investment debt, it's also very inexpensive. It's currently right around 3%. Okay, but will the bank even loan you money? That is a great question. you could be way in debt. So if you go to a bank in the dental lending space, they want to loan you the money. They want to loan you not only money to buy a practice, they want to loan you 100% of the purchase price plus any working capital needed. Now, working capital is usually equal to about 6 weeks of the expenses of the practice. That allows you to have that additional money on hand until the practice is bringing in cash flow from patients as they come in. So now banks that are not in the dental lending space don't understand this model, and they usually will not fund 100%. The reason I bring that up is sometimes people say, oh, I'll just go to my local bank. Well, local banks don't understand how profitable this is and the model that is used. And normal businesses do not get 100% financing. This is unique to a dental loan. I even had a bank recently not only loan 100% of the purchase price plus working capital, but this bank loaned 100% of the real estate as well. Now, I realized that adding that on, you go, oh my gosh, it's even a bigger loan. But of course, you'd be paying rent if you purchased a practice. And if you're paying debt to own the building or the real estate space, and that amount is equal to or less than your rent, at the end, you will have that real estate space or property. And that again is, of course, incredible investment debt. Now, it's not until recently that I've heard of banks loaning 100% of the real estate, but we have a lender that will do that. So that's another great benefit. Now, I think this second bullet point is really important. So even if you have considerable student debt, you can still get a large loan. I had a purchaser once who had come out of school with $800,000 in debt. Now, realize I only work with endodontists, so their debt is probably a little bit higher than the general dentist. But he had this debt and he had no problem getting $950,000 loan to buy a practice. The reason is because the bank realized that he could repay his student loans more quickly as an owner, even with this additional debt. So even though his debt numbers went up, he was going to pay them both off at a more quickly. So the banks understand that and are willing to loan on it. Now I say that with the last one in mind. They only will loan large amounts for a practice, and as I've described, as long as the practice is priced correctly. So how do we price the practice correctly? And how much is too much? The price on the practice should be such that you still have a market wage salary and the remaining profit is used to pay off the practice. Okay, what do I mean by this? I'm trying to say that the cash flow of the practice is such that you should be able to take home an associate type wage or salary even after paying the expenses and debt payments. Now, this price is mainly based on the cash flow, but location, equipment, and other factors can make a difference. For example, in endodontic practices, we look at the age of referrers. There's many different things to look at, but the cash flow is the main item. So if you're going to make the same salary by purchasing this practice, but at the end of the debt payments, which are usually 10 years or less, and you own this practice, clearly you can see the financial advantage to ownership. And this doesn't even begin to take into account all the tax advantages we discussed. So banks will loan large amounts at 100% as long as the practice is priced correctly. I need to add a caveat here. If you have filed for bankruptcy, you are most likely not a good candidate. Occasionally there will be an SBA or a lender who will. I actually did get one purchaser had filed for bankruptcy and was able to get approved, but in general, that is very, very hard to overcome. So as long as you haven't had a bankruptcy and yet you're just sitting there with normal student loans or even large student loans and some debt for your living is expected, just it can't be anything outrageous. Okay, a little bit more on debt. What about the risk of taking on debt? Unbelievably, a default rate for a dental practice in this dental space is less than 0.5%. The banks review this and want to make sure that they're making good loans, and the few faults that do occur can mainly be attributed to these 4 items. Now, hopefully you never experienced drugs, alcohol, divorce, depression, or irresponsible spending. I think my best example of irresponsible spending is we had a purchaser applying for a loan. He had been out working 3 months and had decided this working for somebody else was not for him. He wanted to get his own practice, but prior to doing that, he spent $85,000 on a car. The bank did not loan him money. It's not that you can't have an $85,000 car. You absolutely can, but you need to be in your practice first, and you need to have perhaps secured your practice loan, and the bank, they viewed that as irresponsible spending. So anyway, but the bank analyzes the loan. So they're going to look at it in depth. And if they approve it, they expect complete success, or else they wouldn't loan you. Not only do they analyze the loan with underwriters, the bank has a legal team. They're on your side. The bank, you are their client, and they have attorneys, financial people. They are going to look at this loan from every aspect and make sure that you are protected. For example, we had somebody use a bank that was not in the dental space once, and that bank didn't even require a lease. Now, I'm here to tell you, whatever bank you use, you better have a lease on the space that you're going into. And the reason I say that is because if they kick you out, you have no way to repay the loan back. You would be in a world of hurt. So that's the benefit to banks in the dental space. They understand what they're doing. So this bank is there to protect you, and they're going to not give you the money until their legal team has reviewed the contracts, until their financial team has gone over it with a fine-tooth comb, and they say, yes, this person is going to be able to pay the money back. Now, we realize that it's a big chunk of debt, but this is debt you are investing in yourself. So if you take ownership of your practice, that should mitigate some risks because you should be in control. Your security should be secured with your personal ownership and control. Let's start looking at the numbers. Now, as an associate, let's assume you produce $600,000 annually, and you're paid 30% of collections, which equals that $180,000 figure. Now, as an owner, let's say you produce the same $600,000. However, the total revenue of the practice is at $900,000 because the practice has 33% hygiene. As an owner, your income just went to 40% of the $900,000, not of the $600,000, to create that $360,000 in income. Now, if you were an endodontist, I would assume you would be doing $750,000 in collections. As an employee, you would be paid $300,000 in income, and the endodontic owner would take home $450,000 as an owner. We've got that $180,000 that you make a year as an associate, and let's assume you work 28 years. This is a very low number, but I would assume that everybody would like to work just 28 years, so I went with that. Now, total income over your career for 28 years is $5,040,000. The practice net income at $360,000 a year is consistent if you're the owner, but if you're the new owner, obviously you're going to need debt to pay off the practice. So the $84,000 debt was derived by a loan for 10 years at 3.44% for $710,000. Now, if that's the practice loan you got, you would be paying $84,000 a year, which would result in $276,000 in income for the first 10 years. Of course, once the loan is paid off, you jump up to the practice net income of $360,000 for the last 18 years. This makes your total income after debt $9,240,000. Now, if you're an endodontic employee, your associate income as an employee should be $8.4 million. As an endodontic owner, your number goes to 14,420,000. No, yeah, $14.42 million. Quite a big number. But now we get to the 4.2 million. Obviously, over the 28-year career, if you're making only 5.04 as an employee as compared to an owner at 9.24, the difference is the $4.2 million. As an owner, you have $4.2 million in profit that the associate never has. Now, if you're an endodontist, you have foregone $6,020,000 of owner profit. But what do you do with that 4.2 million? Do you put it under your mattress? I would venture to say no. This chart shows what could happen if you invested the 4.2 million. The 4.2 million is represented by the reddish line, and you can see how it grows over time due to once your debt is paid off, the line starts increasing more. I would like to say also, most people pay off their practices considerably before the 10 years. There's usually not a prepayment penalty after year one. So most people pay that debt off more quickly. But in this case, you paid it off on the 10 years, and in the 28 years, you got to the 4.2 million. The purple line shows if you had invested this money and you had gotten a 6% rate of return. Now, the S&P 500 over the last 30 years had a return of 9.87 million. So I feel like this 6% is pretty conservative, and you can see that you have just turned your 4.2 million into 9.2 million. Congratulations. Okay, so this 4.2 million or 9.2 million, are they both conservative? We just talked about that it's conservative because you would most likely pay it off early, but we're not even taking that into account. Now, additionally, we say it's super conservative because we assumed it was a 28-year work span when the average work span is actually 40 to 42 years, depending on your year of graduation or your age at graduation. We did not factor in any tax benefit to these owners for these numbers. We just said if these were the numbers, so that makes it conservative. Additionally, we assume $0 of growth in the collection figures. It is my hope that your practice is growing, and it should be. Even if it's not growing, at a bare minimum, you should be able to raise your fees, and we, of course, did not account for that either. Nor did we consider that you should sell your practice at retirement. Now, your practice at retirement should not only be able to sell, but it should be a valuable asset that is worth considerably more than you paid for it. Additionally, we used a conservative 6% rate of return on the investment. Now, if we use the S&P return for the 30 years of 9.87, that's normal, your actual incremental owner benefit is almost 16.5 million. It's astounding. Now, if you were an endodontist, you would have at that 6% an additional 14.42 million. So you can see that this $16.5 million allows you to retire when you're, say, 55 instead of 69. My boss arrived at work in a brand new Lamborghini, and I said, "Wow, that's an amazing car." Now he replied, "If you work hard, put all your hours in, and strive for excellence, I'll get another one next year." He's just telling the truth. Owners get wealthy, and employees get their salary. Employees don't have any wealth creation. So someone's going to make the money. Shouldn't it be you? Why would you be willing to work harder and longer for lower income and no control? Don't let fear drive you.